Alrighty, so yeah, just a reminder. This is the last Photoshop project that we're doing for this unit, which means everything that we've done in Photoshop through, I believe, Project 4 is going to be due this week by Thursday at midnight. If you've done your homework quizzes, all good, everything should be good. If you haven't at least done the tests, do each of the project tests and have those finished so you can turn in Project 4, 5, and 6. Just to give you a heads up, the next projects are going to be done in InDesign. I don't have the quizzes opened up for the InDesign, but you will have those available and the videos available as well at that time. So this next project that you're doing is to retouch and to recolorize, to color correct a variety of different photos that they give you. It's relatively easy, and this is actually what Photoshop was meant to do. It was meant to be able to edit photographs, to bring out the best of them, to do color correction. They've gotten a lot more fancy nowadays, especially, is anybody interested in photography and to probably pursuing or doing something like that? When digital photos first came out, this was something that hardly anybody ever did. So Photoshop was made as a way of editing or taking a real photograph that's been scanned and being able to correct it for digital use. Nowadays, all photographs are practically digital, and so it's very common to be able to do these, and it's a lot more robust as far as the tools that you can use, especially if you're working in Camera Raw versus not Camera Raw. Y'all get into that when you take a photography class. But they're going to be giving you these photographs, and they look okay. If you were just to use these, you would say, hey, what's really wrong with them? Some of them are a little bit more obvious what's wrong with them. Let's see if I can find, like they'll give you this one. It's going to have scratches on it, and you're going to be able to take out those scratches, remove the folds. Other things, it's very subtle, but they have color problems. Let's see, I've got these finished up. So here's, for instance, this particular plate. If I was looking at it as a trained eye, I can tell you that it is a little bit too dark. The white balance on it is not done. So you'll be taking those and brightening them up. Others, they'll have color spectrum problems. So for instance, I believe it's this, yeah, that one is a little bit red tinted. Let's see, I don't have that one finished. Probably not. And the other one, the red spectrum, yeah, this one's a little bit too dark. You're going to be lightening it up as well. Very simple things that you can do for this one. What I want to do is I want to give you a little bit more of a challenge because you can do so much more with these particular photographs. They're only giving you one example of the family, and with all the little scratches and things that are inside of them. I want to give you some more examples of how you can use Photoshop's touching up tools to be able to refurbish old photographs. So on today's Moodle page, I'll pull this back up, I'm giving you another bonus assignment. These are restoration pictures, and you can find each of these pictures inside of the folder. There should be 5 of them, so you can download each one of them. What I'll do is, this will be due in, I think, 2 weeks by the end of the month. Yeah, where is it? Yeah, October 29th, so you got a little time to work on them. Each one of these is going to be worth 1 extra bonus point, up to 5 points on any quiz grade. So if you miss something, this is a way of making it up for there. Let's look at the photographs that I'm going to give you, and I'll work through these. Each one of these is a little bit more banged up, so you've got a bunch of little dots on them, you've got scratches. Others may be completely broken apart, so this will probably be the most challenging one to do. And others are simply off by themselves. Actually, that one, I should have another one for that one. But let me see, give me just a second. I may have, this one I did before, and I actually, this one's completely touched up. Let me see if I can find another one that's not been done. Rebuild. Ha, 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 ha. So I don't want that one. See if I saved another one. That's okay. I'll just come back to that one. Well, let me show you how to think about redoing each of these. I'll drag the family photograph into Photoshop. We'll fire it up and see what we can do with it. Dun, 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 dun. May have thrown it away. That was another one I considered giving y'all. Okay, we'll do with this one. Let me reset my tools. So if I'm looking at this picture, obviously it's got a lot of things wrong with it. One of the first things I like to do is to do what's called a color correction or a levels balance. Whenever I look at an image, I want to make sure it's got really good darks and really good lights to it. So if an image is too washed out or too gray, I may adjust the white point for this one. The book is going to give you several different ways of doing this, and they all kind of do the same thing. But if I'm looking at this, not necessarily at the bottom part, I want to say, is there any really, really white areas? So that should be my highlights. If I'm looking at somebody's face, where do you think the best highlights should be for a face? The eyes? Where else? The forehead. And? I hear, what?
Cheeks.
Cheeks, yes. Any place that sticks out the most should have the most highlights to them. So if I'm looking at this face, it's very, very flat. That's because there's no highlights to it on there. The same way, or the opposite is for the shadows. You would want underneath the chin, any place that recesses, to be a little bit darker. Under the chin, just inside the nose, or on the side of the face. So if I was a professional photographer, I would light this photograph to be to give me those good shadow and highlight contrasts. In the book, you can go to, it talks about using the adjustment areas, so you can go to adjustments. These four up here kind of work together, and the book will go into a little bit more detail about how to use them. What I like to use is levels. This is the one that I tend to go to most often because it gives me the best control over this. This will open up a little histogram dialog box, and what we're seeing here is called a histogram. Essentially, it ranks out the value of all your darks and all your lights. And you'll get this kind of, I call it a mountain range. What you see in the middle are your mid-tone values, and you can see it's very, very gray. Lots of mid-tones, so that's why it's very high on here. If it was very high on one side, I could tell you that it would be very dark or very light, and you can see there's not a lot of lights on here. When you adjust the areas, the little arrows on the side, you can see I can lighten up the photograph, and if I go too far, it'll completely blow it out. Or if I pulled the other one, I can darken up the area and make the areas very, very dark. If I was a professional photographer, what I would want to do is I would want my arrows to be right at the starting and stopping points of the mountain, which I can tell is right about here. So it's pretty good on darks. Same way for the lights. I could easily lighten it up and it would look a little bit better from this one. Same way for my midtones. I can now go back and adjust it, making it lighter or darker with this one. If I can find my other really blown out one, it'll show you a little bit better. But so here it was before, here it was after. It's a little subtle change to go with that, but that's okay for working with. If I wanted my document to be completely black and white, what I need to do is I need to remove the color to desaturate it. Again, those are under your adjustments, and you can choose here at the bottom, whoop, too far, at the bottom to desaturate, to remove the color. And that'll turn it into a completely black and white image. Here's one thing to keep in mind, however. In Photoshop, you can work with different color modes. So what are the two that we most commonly use? RGB and CMYK. Those are good for the output, if it's being printed or for your screen. I can check my color mode, so obviously we're working in RGB right now, red, green, and blue. Even though it's black and white image, I've desaturated it, removed the color, it's still giving me values of red, green, and blue. I'm going to undo what I've done. Actually, I'll tell you what, let me prove to you it's still red, green, and blue. You can pull up your color picker and actually pick a value, and you can see there's my red, green, and blue values, and they'll probably be all about the same from here. All cool? Same way for CMYK. I'm going to undo what I did. Undo, desaturate, put the stuff on here. Another color mode is actually a grayscale color mode. And this is a true grayscale. This will only convert, it'll take away all your RGB values. And it'll say, are you sure you want to discard it? It'll turn it black and white, we'll discard. It looks the same, it's still black and white. But when I send it to a printer, the printer won't be receiving any color information. It'll only receive black and white information, or shades of gray from there. Does that kind of make sense? So if I was to send it to my color printer over there, it won't use any of my cyan, magenta, or yellow ink. It'll just use my black ink when printing. Some printers require that, especially if you're sending it to make a plate of just one color. this is how you would do that. So that's just kind of be aware. There's a difference between being in grayscale and just having a gray image to work with. All cool? Okay. Let's have some fun. I love doing this. I love being able to correct images and fix the mistakes that I'm working with. I'm going to undo my grayscale. I'm going to actually work with it in color. The way to think about these is you want to preserve not just the image but also the textures and all the little details of the image. And the tools I'm going to use can be found sort of in the middle of your toolbox. If I click and hold, you've got the healing brush tools, patch tools, you've even got some red eye and content aware. I won't go into those. You've also got a clone stamp, and you've got these down at the bottom, your dodge and burn and sponge tools. Let's check out the healing brush tool because this is kind of my favorite. I'll use spot healing from here. What I want to do is, with the spot healing brush tool, is get rid of some of these different spots. Let's see if I can find a really good one. Here's one down here. So I've got this particular area. If I was to, say, grab my paintbrush and just pick a color that's near it, say this particular shade of green, and start painting over it, why would that not look good? Yeah, it looks like a blob. It's too flat. The image itself has all these nice little textures, little bits of light and dark that are inside of it. Well, with my spot healing brush tool, I can click and drag over it and it'll start to kind of shade in that particular area. And what I'm going to tell Photoshop to do is to look around this area and pick up the pixels and pick up the texture that's outside of that and copy it into there. So when I let go, I get something that looks a lot like that. Pretty cool? Very, very easy. That's a little bit more dramatic. So if I've got something that's, say, the corner of her mouth, let's see if I can click and drag over that and rework that. Pretty good. Picks it up. Same way if I've got this line that goes across his face. I can click and drag over it. See how well that picks up. And it's pretty much gone. So if you've got a picture of yourself, you've got acne all over your face or something, you want to get rid of the bumps. That's one way of being able to do it. It does work the same way as a brush, so you can change the size of it, making it larger. And usually within 1 or 2 clicks, you can remove entire areas that may have little spot problems along with it. Click and drag over lines, and the lines are usually removed as well. If you go too crazy with it, you can completely remove that out. Check out what happened. Where did this part come from? Came from down here. Remember, it's looking around the area. Now, Photoshop doesn't know what's around it. It's just trying to pull from common areas. So that's why it did that particular thing. If you do want to choose where you want to pull it from, this is where the regular healing brush tool comes in handy. With this one, I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. Yeah. I need to hold down my Option key, and I get a little crosshair. You see the little crosshair? I can choose where I want this to be pulled from. So if I choose here, click once. When I let go of my Option key, I can click and drag around, and it will pick up just that particular area and blend it in there, usually for better or for worse. So this will give me a little bit more control over what I want to do. Cool? Let's see if I can do another one. Let's see. The other tools, the clone stamp kind of works the same way as the healing brush tool, except it won't blend it in. Let's see if I can go back. Where's a good place to work? I think I'm actually working on one. Yeah. The clone stamp tool, I can hold down Option and choose an area. Zoomed in. If you hold down Option and scroll your wheel, it will zoom in. Let's go back. Option and click, choose the area, and then I can paint over that particular area to fill it in as well. Adjust the size of my brush and paint it in. Again, if I chose, hold down Option, choose this area, and moved away, when I click and drag, I can quickly copy an entire area and paint in that area on there. You can get into a lot of trouble with doing that. Pretty cool? All right. One last thing. Let's see if I can find a large area. If I wanted to fill in a larger area, this is where the patch tool comes in handy. You could probably use the clone stamp. But with the patch tool, this allows you to click and drag around a set space, and so you get your little selection area. And with this one, up at the top of the options, you've got source and you've got destination. With source selected, I can click and drag and choose exactly the area that I want to copy out from. So I was trying to find something that's got roughly the same texture. When I remove it, you can see it copied that area into this one. I'll undo what I did. If I choose destination, instead of copying where I drag to, it's actually going to copy whatever I have onto that particular area and actually move it in. To be a little bit more dramatic, let's go back to his head. So if I chose his head and I wanted to copy it and blend it into an area, that's one way of doing it as well. Notice how it went from being very light to actually blending into the background. That's what these correction tools are doing. They're looking at the pixels and making sure that the colors, light and darks, match up from there. Pretty cool? That's actually getting kind of spooky. All right, last little set of tools are your dodge, burn, and sponge tool. This goes back to kind of doing darkroom photography. Anybody ever do the traditional develop your own film in a darkroom? Y'all are a lost generation. Okay, there was a time when it was magical. Okay, but the reason these tools look like this, why the dodge tool looks kind of like a lollipop or the burn tool is just your hand. When you were in a darkroom, you physically put a slide of your photograph under this light projector and projected it onto the paper that you were making a print from. And the longer the light hit the paper, the darker the image got. It burned it into there. So if I wanted to adjust how much light was hitting one area, I could either dodge it away. I could block off an area by putting a little piece of paper on a stick and like putting a little shadow on top of it. That's what this is actually looking. You're dodging away the image, which would lighten it up. Or if I wanted to burn in an area, I would use my hands and make like a little circle, and I could block off everything else except for the circle. I could burn in one particular area to make it much, much darker. The sponge tool is used in color photography to be able to add or remove colors to it. But let me show you what the dodge tool would do. So with the dodge, it allows you to lighten up a color. With this one, just be aware of what range you're working in, whether you want it to be in the shadows, the midtones, or highlights, and your exposure. Right now, my exposure is pretty low, and I'm working in my midtones. So if I wanted to lighten up his forehead, all I got to do is click and drag around, and it tends to lighten up that particular area that I'm working with. Now, if I keep clicking, I can very, very quickly go too far, and it starts to almost not look correct. But it may take a couple of clicks. If I bring up my exposure a lot larger, let's say 81, and I click it, obviously it goes a lot quicker in doing that, and you can see it gets out of hand too much. Cool? So you want it to be a very, very light touch for what you're working with. If I set it to, let's see, if I try to do this in the shadows, it's not really picking up too much. But if I change my range to the shadows, now if I try to do it, it goes a little bit quicker. Since this is, yeah, picking up way, way too much from there. The opposite is true for the burn tool. If I wanted the burn tool to get a lot darker, I'll try it on her face, I can make the shadows get darker with it. Just 1 or 2 clicks from there. Just a little bit, make the face pop out from this one. Again, pay attention to what range you're working with and what your exposure is going to be, because you don't want it to get way, way too burned from that as well. Cool? Let's see. What was the last thing I can show you? We won't save this one up. The other thing, let's try the red cast one. We'll open this up in Photoshop. If you ever have an old photograph that is, it's been skewed to one color or the other one, or the other way, we can go to adjustments, and you can also start to play around with the color balance, the hue, and the saturation. Color balance kind of gives you the ability to balance out between one particular color or the other based on its shadows, midtones, or highlights. And so obviously this is very, very red. So I would start with my shadows and pull it down to make it less red, obviously the midtones. And with this one, it's a little bit of a guesswork. If you've never played around with it, it takes a long time to balance out your colors just perfectly. I'm going to show you how to do this really quick. I'll hit cancel. Instead of using the color balance or the hue and the saturation, I'm going to go back to my levels. So remember, the levels are your balance between lights and darks. And so does this look pretty balanced to you? No? Where is it low on? Or is it? I would actually say it's kind of balanced. It's got a good little range going from one area to the other. Instead, I'm looking at my channel for all the colors, red, green, and blue. If you choose a particular color, red, greens, and blues, now let's check it out. Aha! You see it all kind of scrunched up to one side? That means there's a lot of something going on there. Let's adjust this one, pull it to the end of the mountain range. You can see my colors start to almost correct themselves. We'll do the same thing for the green area. Can fix that up. You can pull that in a little bit more. And finally the blue. See, it's all scrunched to one side, and that'll fix that up as well. Pretty cool? So even the channels can be fixed out from there. And so when I say OK, here it was before, and here it is after when working with that. Cool? For the lazy ones, you can always go to Image, and do the auto tone, color, and contrast. And essentially, Photoshop is doing the same thing. It automatically sets those levels per channel to be whatever you want it to be from there. Pretty cool? Okay, so these are going to be the bonus for you to work on. What I'm essentially looking for you to do is to touch them up, recorrect them, and then upload them. I think this is in the wrong one, so I'm going to change this one out on Moodle. But this one, how would you fix this one? This one's going to be a little bit more challenging.
I would use the lasso tool to select it.
There you go.
Place the patch up and select it.
Exactly. So you've used the selection tools, select out each little area. You can cut and paste it into there. Then you can use each of your appropriate tools to get rid of the seam where it needs to be at on there. Flatten it up. You can save it from there as well. All cool? Okay. I'll turn this over to you and let y'all get started. Stop recording.